Okay, so now we're going to go through the analysis of Chapter 3 and Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. Chapter 3 has a new theme introduced, and we get to know some of our characters a little bit better than we did, and of course we'll go over the figurative language. The words in orange are, of course, our vocabulary words. So we're going to start off the chapter right away with it having a couple very nice examples of personification. The dust is rejoicing and laughing, and eventually the dust is forced to surrender. And down in the next sentence here, it says the fine red mud is oozing between our toes and slopping against our ankles. Of course, it can't do any of those things. And the next page I also have noted right here, it says as soon as we were beyond Big Ma's eagle eyes. That's a metaphor. Big Ma's eyes are not eagle eyes. But they're being called eagle eyes. So that's a comparison being made between her eyes and eagle eyes. That is a metaphor. We have a little bit more information about Mama that lets us know kind of more of like the kind of person that she is. And here it says that Mama cared very little about what we preferred. Down here we have a little more information about that whole idea with the bus and the theme of racism, and that is definitely going to play into the other conflict that we see in this chapter. On the next page, we have quite a bit of figurative language and a little bit more information about Little Man and about Big Mom. So up here we have racism and money, where we're talking about the fact that the white kids have a bus and the black kids do not. We have another vocabulary word. Then the next thing we have here is a personification. This is talking about the huge iron-bellied stove. Of course, the stove does not have a belly. That is just the way it's described. We have more of that little man with his whole idea of right and wrong being developed here. This is but Big Ma ain't fair, and little man sitting on the side bench looking totally dejected. Big Ma says something interesting over here to little man. She sits down on the benches and puts her arm around little man and says, "Now look here, it ain't the end of the world. Child, don't you know one day the sun will shine again and you won't get muddy no more?" So Big Ma, even though we're told she's a big woman, a strong woman, and she's obviously had to do a lot in her life, we also see that she has a great deal of compassion for the children, her grandchildren. Down here, we have this kind of works as both the theme of money and racism, but it's also letting us know a little bit more about Big Ma and the kind of person that she is. So that's why this is on both sides, and I've got the green over here. Big Ma says, "One day you'll have plenty of clothes and maybe even a car of your own to ride around in, so don't you pay no mind to them ignorant white folks. You just keep on studying, get yourself a good education, and you'll be all right. Now go wash up." So she definitely wants better things for her grandchildren. Down here we have an example of first onomatopoeia, which is where we have that tat-tat. Onomatopoeia is where the words are telling us the sounds that are being made. The deafening roar that sounds as if thousands of giant rocks, so that's the comparison using like or as. The roar is being compared to thousands of giant rocks being hurled against the earth. Don't know why I actually have alliteration down there. Let's pretend that's not there. Don't write alliteration. Let's go on to the next page. Here we have a couple more vocabulary words. We have some personification and a simile. So the personification, the sun is attempting to penetrate the storm clouds. And over here, the sun is given up, and it's slinking behind the blackening clouds. And then we have the rain falling like hail upon the bent heads. That's a simile on that one. The next page up here we have a simile. We're skidding like frightened puppies. I like that image. Actually, that's a good one. And then we get into this instance that we have with the racism, the theme of racism. The bus is getting close to the kids to make them jump into that ditch of water. We have little man who's just as angry as he can be. We have the I like how it's called the moronic rolls of laughter. we can get an idea of exactly what the children in this story think of the little white children throwing or making them jump into that ditch so that they don't get hit. And then we see a little man getting so upset that he buries his face in his hands and cries. The next page, we're looking at Jeremy, and I think it's interesting because he's kind of, especially later in the story, he's kind of presented as someone who's not all that intelligent. But if we look here, we see that, he's asking the kids about the bus, and we see Cassie realizing something. It says, Jeremy never rode the bus no matter how bad the weather. So we're kind of getting a little bit of an idea of the kind of person that Jeremy is. Next page. Stacy. Stacy's feeling very indignant about the whole event that has just happened to them and is forming a plan. So I've got that information here highlighted. Now I'm introducing this new theme over here. Over the next several pages in this chapter, and it'll repeat itself later in the book as well, we have a new theme, and this is revenge. If you're reading through this part here, I just kind of highlighted, a little bit here and there, but it's honestly this whole section here is talking about that whole theme of revenge. And it keeps going, on to the next few pages. So this is more of the theme of revenge. Make sure you have listened to the chapter and read this over. It's a very important part of the story. We also, with this part of it here, see Stacy with that whole idea of him plotting and trying to figure out how he can best make sure that revenge happens for his family. Here's a personification. The rain is pounding and hammering. Of course, the rain can't do any of those things. And then we see what happens to their little event, their idea of revenge, and how that develops into a much larger than they had expected issue. Next page. The bus is emitting a huge crack and careening drunkenly into the trap. Of course, the bus can't do those things, so that's personification. It sputters a last murmuring protest. It can't do that, and a bus can't, it can die, but not the way that mechanically it can stop running, but a bus doesn't actually die. And then the bus is also compared to a lopsided billy goat on its knees. Fantastic thing there. And we're back into that whole theme of racism. This is more, it's kind of racism, it's kind of actually the revenge. I guess it's how the revenge plays out while the bus meets its demise. And then over here on the next page, we're looking at the children laughing as the white children are getting off from the bus and being faced with having to jump, and they're not quite making it. They're getting a little muddy themselves. Turn the page. Oh, how sweet was well-maneuvered revenge. Great. Continue on that idea of the revenge that the children have shown. They're hiding happy grins. They're having trouble concentrating. This is all that story of revenge from this chapter. Then we see over here, it says it occurred to us that Mama might be preparing to whip us, and we shot each other warning glances. So while Mama seems to be a pretty decent and nice person, apparently, when the children are misbehaving, she's not afraid to make sure they stay in line either. And we have more of the story of the bus and what happened there. Mama's gathering their study materials and moving them around to try to stop their foolishness. I like this description of Big Ma over here, except for the earthy humming of Big Ma's rich alto voice. Got a big woman. We know her skin is brown as a pecan shell. Big hands, rough hands, calloused hands that have worked. She cares about those kids, and now she's humming. Neat character forming here in our minds. Now we're getting into the part of that whole, this kind of goes along with the burnings. It's talking about the night men. And the night men are riding again. We'll find out more about that as the story develops. We see Cassie over here being a little not obeying the way that she should. She's sliding the latch off the door, slipping onto the front porch, saying, "Let me in." So she's doing things she's not necessarily supposed to do. This is a description here of what says anytime they think we're stepping out of our place, they feel like they got to stop us. So this is talking more about the nightmen and what the nightmen are doing. Down here we have a personification. A clap of deafening thunder drowned Mr. Avery's words. The rain quickened. Those are both personification. This one over here says he collapsed in silence by the door, breathing hard. I knew his face was drawn. His eyes had a haggard look. Where Stacy is realizing what can happen. Actions have consequences. And he's worried about what kinds of consequences he and his siblings are going to have. Stacy down here is wanting to accept some of that responsibility. He really wants to help. And we see here where it says, but Papa told me to help you. He's trying to be a young man in this story. Another indication of kind of woman that Big Ma is. I saw her outlined in the doorway, a rifle in her hands. Next page. Onomatopoeia, the drip drap of water falling. We hear that sound. Some more of the information on Cassie. Here she's sneaking outside and paralyzed with fear, even though it ends up just being the dog. We have a simile here. The caravan of headlights appearing, coming far along the rain-soaked road like cat eyes in the night. This is also working on that whole theme of racism as that caravan of cars pulls into their driveway. And that's what's going on down here. We have the rear lights glowing like distant red embers, so using the comparison using like or as a simile. They were swallowed from view by the Granger forest. Of course, the Granger forest can't swallow anything, but it makes a nice personification. The moon slid from its dark covers. Of course, the moon can't slide anywhere, but we get the image of the clouds just kind of gradually making that moon show back up. Then it says, I could see Mr. Morrison clearly. Next page, moving silently like a jungle cat. So I guess he's a big man, but if he needs to move and be quiet, he can do that as well. That's a simile. And we have Cassie here, feeling sick. I crawled onto the porch and crept trembling toward the door. The children are definitely concerned now about what sort of consequences their actions will have. And the personification here, we have, against my will, the vision of ghostly headlights soaked into my mind, and trembling racked my body. So we have some personification happening there in that last part of chapter 3.